Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another set of videos in which we continue to talk, learn, and navigate Business Central. So today's video is going to be quick and short, and we're simply just going to talk about some of the new features, a new feature that has been released into the environment as part of Microsoft's future release plans. This feature is very useful. It was identified as a big gap in the system, and it truly helps, at least it's a starting point, so it truly helps with navigating and fetching information that you couldn't do at some point. So there's always a workaround with that, but that workaround was a bit lengthy, had required some specificity in the information that you should have known from a user's perspective. But in this case, this new feature actually helps you narrow it down with some limited information that you may know about a specific document in the system. So you should be able to see this new feature come up. If it hasn't on your homepage, if it hasn't, then most likely you need to update your environment, go into the feature management and release that new feature, which is called Find Entry. So it should just get displayed right onto your home page. So before we actually click on it and find out what exactly is required in terms of the filtering criteria and the things that you can do with this, we'll actually go into a little bit of a context on the information and the idea what brought this new feature to be released in the system. So if you were to go into the purchase invoices, and I will have a list of invoices here, because this is a demo environment, we probably don't have enough invoices, but the volume does increase for organizations that are mid-size at least. And I can imagine that if they are manufacturing, then they will have more invoices. So the idea here is to be able to fetch a purchase invoice, for instance. So we'll treat that as one of the documents for this demo. And if you were to go into the system, if you had thousands of purchases invoices, and your vendor comes up to you, sends you an invoice, and you can retrieve it. You actually don't know if that invoice actually exists in the system or existed, or was it even paid to the vendor by any chance. So instead of this new feature that was released, the workaround was to actually go through purchase invoice, filter your way through it, figure out where the invoice was, and it was a bit of a workaround, a lot of time-consuming activity for one particular person just to go through it, because the volume changes. And if we were to go into this purchase invoice, we will be using this as our example. So in the Find Entries table, there are three new drop-down menus that were introduced, and I'm expecting more drop-down menus to come up and at least have more filtering criteria associated with it, just because it doesn't make sense for me to be able to filter through just the document number and the external document number, just because those are very unique. So if I already knew those that information, I could have easily have filtered it through on a purchase invoice table, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to have that available there, just that available there. So I'm hoping that Microsoft will release more filtering criteria in order to navigate and be able to specify which invoice or which document that I'm looking for. So in our case scenario, we're going to actually use the posting date. So we're going to remember that is 4/8/2022, and that's our filtering criteria that we will be using in order to fetch this purchase invoice. So that's what I wanted to show you. And now if we go back onto the home page, you click on the Find Entries, and this is a new table that shows up. This is the drop-down menu that I was referring to. There's like three different options that you can choose from. Search for all documents, basically any document that you would like. You can search for a business contacts. If you have contacts in the system, you can search on their basis, on their name basis. And if you want to search for an item references, so basically if you've used an item somewhere, then you can reference that and see what documentations actually use that specific item. So we'll stick with search for documents, and I'll let you actually navigate through and search and figure out, and even learn, of course, how you can use the other two options. So this is what I was referring to back then with the document number and external document number. So we've talked about this in one of my previous videos. Document number is basically associated with the number series, so you should be familiar with that. But if you don't know document numbers, right, then the posting date is what comes in handy. At least for this enhancement that has been released. And going back to the same conversation or the same comment, if I already knew a document number or external document number, I should be able to filter things through the actual purchase invoice page. So not too sure how this could be useful. Sure, in one sense, it is useful that it just navigates and helps you find it a lot quicker than you would be able to do it at a purchase invoice table. But that's okay. At least something is there that has been released. So let's use the posting date, and then I will uh, type in the posting date that we were trying to retrieve. So it was 4/8/2022. I'm just going to do find entries and see how quick it is actually. So it's really quick to actually display those records, and obviously it'll take some time if there's a big volume of transactions and invoices and documentation that it needs to search through. But in our case, we had only like 4 or 5 documentations associated with purchase invoice. So for that specific posting date, so it was able to retrieve two documents, purchase order and a purchase invoice. So they're both related to each other, of course. You can go into each document if you like go into show related entries. It should open up your purchase order and it tells you the status and everything, so you can make changes if the status is open. So refer back to the purchase order video in which you can learn how to create a purchase order and then what is the basis of navigating your way through the purchase order and then all the way to the purchase invoice. Similarly, we can go into the purchase invoice and see the show related entries, and this is the invoice that we're expecting for that our purchase order. It's also a status is open, and we have quite a few things here that we can obviously edit and whatnot. So in our case, when we're actually retrieving such information, most likely our status is closed or it has been paid and whatnot. So you'll get to see a lot more of those documentations in there. So with that, I think we've covered this new functionality. It's very useful. I believe it's still working its way through the system. And as Microsoft builds on this enhancement, it will really help everybody to navigate and be able to fetch the information that they require instead of actually going through the long way. So this feature is very useful in that sense, and I hope that this video actually helped you, give you a little bit of understanding of what this new feature tends to do and it could be useful for. So hopefully next time we were going to talk about something more generic, and we'll continue to learn about Business Central as we proceed.